posted here in the council chambers. And if you'd all please join me in rising for a moment of silence and pledge allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, roll call, please, Beth.
Rehnquist.
Here.
Lange.
Here.
Merrill.
Here.
Clausen.
Here.
Murin.
Here.
Jackson.
Here.
Faust. File.
Okay, and with that, I will look for a motion to approve the consent agenda with one change. It's been requested. Take item number 15 off the consent agenda and move and place it on the regular agenda.
I'll make the motion with the addendum.
Second.
Okay, please vote.
I wanted to comment on some of the consent agenda, if I could.
We have a motion and a second, and we need to take a vote on that now. I think there'll be opportunity further along in the agenda to discuss.
I
So,
can speak about.
not right now. We've had a motion and a second, so we need to vote on this first.
All right, can I comment after the vote?
Yes, that's what I mean. There will be opportunity later in the meeting. So please vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative.
All right, and next, we'll look for a motion to approve the full agenda
Make the motion, Your Honor.
With the addition of that item.
with the addition of item number 15. Yes.
We'd like to request that the second reading of the zoning ordinance on the property in section 32 be tabled or removed from the agenda or whatever you do at this time.
Okay.
As I told you at the public hearing a couple weeks ago, we wanted to bring everything together at once.
Dick, I think what we'll do, is, again, since we've had a motion and a second, is have you discuss that at the time of number 21 on the agenda.
I'd rather do it now and get it over with.
Well, I think we do actually need to take it up since it's on second reading. I don't know that we can withdraw it
Yeah, he's not
at
taking
this
it.
point. Yeah. It would have to be, there can be a request to be tabled, and we can have a discussion of that, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, okay, thank you. All right, with that, we have a motion and a second to approve the full agenda with number 15 coming on to the full agenda. Please vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative.
And that takes us to public hearings and related action, item number 19. I'll open this public hearing to consider the SCM 10X Norfolk 1120 LLC redevelopment plan. And I think to kick that off, we'll hear from Andy.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, this is the redevelopment project that's taking place corner of 13th and Omaha. And this is the public hearing. The Planning Commission and the Community Development Agency have all seen this plan and recommended approval at all layers. We haven't had too many questions on this particular plan. It's a pretty straightforward plan. And I believe the redeveloper's next steps is to look at putting a redevelopment agreement together, which will then go to the Community Development Agency for consideration. So with that, I will be available for any questions.
Okay. Any questions for Andy? Seeing none. It's a public hearing, so if there's anyone wishing to make comment, now would be the appropriate time. Good evening.
Hello, I'm Caitlin Sudfeld. I'm here on behalf of the developer SCM 10X Norfolk 1120 LLC. That is a bit of a mouthful. And I'm here to answer any questions if there are any.
Okay. Any questions? Questions, comments among council? It's a public hearing. If anyone else wishes to come forward, now's the time to do it. Okay. Seeing none, I will close the hearing And move to item number 20, consideration of resolution number 2017-23 approving the SCM 10X Norfolk 1120 LLC redevelopment plan.
Your Honor, I'd move consideration of resolution 2017-23.
Second?
Okay. Any discussion on that? Seeing none, I'd ask for your vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative, Resolution 2017-23 is adopted.
Okay, moving to the regular agenda with item number 15. Would look for a motion to consider approval to remove property located in Section 3, Township 23, Range 1, Madison County, Nebraska, at the request of Paul Mettleman, president of Elkhorn Construction Company, from the county industrial designation. It looks like Dennis will,
Motion, please.
oh, motion
I'll
on that?
make the motion.
Second that, Your Honor.
Okay. Dennis, do you want to open on this for us?
This is the one about the Mettleman. We're supportive of wanting to remove this from the county industrial tract. Just as we were reviewing it today, I noticed that there was 2 small fingers that are highlighted in yellow on the drawing in front of you that were not included in the request. I discussed this with Jim Cox, and he was going to ask Olson, who developed the legal description for this, to add those 2 pieces. So to keep this moving, I think the appropriate motion would be is to approve this with the addition of these 2 fingers to the request that came from the county.
Okay. Any questions for Dennis on that?
I make the motion.
And,
You had the motion on it.
yeah, who's that?
Was that me?
No, Rob did. And
Okay.
I would offer to amend that motion with the inclusion, as Dennis spoke, of those 2 little fingers in there being
I would-
resubmitted to us at a later date, I suppose.
Well, I think the process is the county is looking for approval or disapproval from the city. So I think if we give them the approval condition on the addition of those, if they add those to their hearing, they can just bring it forward and keep things moving on the timeline that we got tonight.
So not necessary to amend this as is?
Well, I think you need to amend your motion to include those. I don't think we need to wait for them to come back, bring anything
Okay.
back. I think the county can move forward with getting the corrected legal description, get their notice published for their public hearing, move forward and approve it with those 2 fingers.
and
Yeah, it
Rob,
makes sense to keep the timeline going, so I'll ask for an amendment to the motion.
and you'll
I would
amend
second
your
that.
second, okay.
Okay, all right. So we have a motion for amendment on the original proposal and a second. Any further questions or comments on that? If not, I'd ask for your vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative, motion carries. No.
All right. Moving then to item number 21 on the regular agenda. I would look,
Coming up.
okay. Hello, Dick.
I'm here if you want me to
Yes.
officially request
Okay.
it be tabled or
We-
withdrawn or whatever the appropriate action is.
Okay, before that motion's made, I would just note that after the motion to table is made, there's no discussion, so you can, if you'd want to present to us your
Well,
reasoning
we
for
just,
that.
like I told you before, we want to have everything together at one time and want to get everything else caught up to the zoning before we proceed with the zoning.
Okay.
So,
So essentially, having this all march forward in
Yes.
one group, yeah,
yeah,
okay, all right. And tabling tonight would better it to happen,
okay,
yeah,
thank you.
okay? All right,
I make a motion, we table ordinance.
We gotta open it first. Don't we have to open it on second reading before we can table it?
Oh, you have to open on second reading first?
yeah, okay, so I'll go, looking for a motion to consider ordinance number 5447, approving zoning change. Okay,
Second.
okay, and now we'd look for.
I would now like to make a motion to table ordinance 454-7.
Okay. And since there's no discussion on that, I would ask for your vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative, motion to table carries.
Okay, item number 22, for a motion to consider approval of an agreement with Richard A. Comey, doing business as the Center for Municipal Solutions, to assist, advise, and represent the city on matters relating to wireless telecommunications facilities. Do we have a motion on
I
that?
would move consideration of approval of the agreement, Your Honor.
Second?
Okay, right. Bruce, have you signed in, please?
Yes.
Bruce, can we have you start by stating your name? and
My
address,
name is
please?
Bruce Finley. I live here in Norfolk, Nebraska. I live in South Norfolk, just south of Omaha Avenue. I was looking at the current laws and what already is in place for regulations regarding telecommunications. And I have great concerns that this will infringe upon the wireless communication development of individuals who wish to use it to create private internet service to the surrounding area around their house. I feel it would make a lot of sense to regulate the corporations, but there's already enough remedies in place with the current law to deal with individuals using the communications grid and putting out their own stuff. So I'm just here to caution that I think it would be in the best interests of opportunity and the development of internet in the community by the people themselves if only corporations were regulated by any laws put in place or suggested by this individual. That's all I had to say. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you, Bruce. Maybe for a little background on this, Val or Clint, can you talk about the reasoning behind this? Lyle?
Lyle?
Okay, or Shane?
Small cell technology, telecommunication, wireless technology, leaps and bounds, we're all aware of. We're getting into fourth, fifth, and continued generations of the products and services that are available over the wireless networks that are across the United States, across the world, in fact. As they continue to grow and we start to see companies start to engage deeply in the infrastructure piece of that, and in the infrastructure piece of supporting these networks, there seems to be a lot of information that we have to collect, analyze, and gather in order to make sure that we're moving forward consistently with the technology, consistently with the community's needs and wants and desires. Obviously, the technology is great, and our citizens use it every day of their lives. But with the explosion of all the abilities of these providers and the placement of the small cell technology in particular, there's an opportunity. In fact, there was a legislative bill, I believe it was 389, that was presented to the legislature this year that really would have gutted, in my opinion, local control over the placement of these towers. In fact, it would have allowed placement of towers in the city's right-of-way throughout the community, and the size and shape and definition of those towers wasn't really regulated, so we could have large towers, 60, 70, 80 foot and beyond towers placed in our right of way, even downtown, without any controls at all to say where and where they cannot go, and in a ability for us to make sure that we're getting good technology out there, good placement of the towers, looking for co-location opportunities, we're moving forward, we move forward with an agreement with Municipal Solutions tonight, the Center for Municipal Solutions, to try to guide us and keep those transactions at arm's length from the city and the city staff. We're reaching out to experts from afar to help us walk through that process as this technology continues to grow in our community. We want to embrace the technology. We just want to make sure we're doing it in a good, consecutive manner, and we're developing a relationship with the providers out there, all of them, that allows us to do that and keep that arm's length transaction. So we're getting experts, again, from the Center of Municipal Solutions to help us with that. And Robert Nauman is here tonight to help address some questions that we might have. But, as we sit in our legislative committees and go to our league meetings, this was all the rage in the last session here in the legislative session and in our last meetings that we had, and a lot of information is being transmitted out there to a lot of communities. Lincoln, Nebraska, for example, has a wonderful example how they regulate and provide local control on small cell technology, but yet embrace the technology fully. So it goes down from placement to size of towers to co-location to aesthetics of your community. The list goes on and on. So it's pretty diverse and pretty dramatic in a good and potentially bad ways if we're not putting some good common sense local controls in it. And that's what we're hoping to do with the Center for Municipal Solutions tonight. And Robert, you're an expert from afar, and you can explain it better than I can. So please come up and introduce yourself to the council and answer any questions that they may have.
Sure. My name is Robert Newman. From afar, but I reside in Omaha, so I'm kind of the Midwest representative for CMS. And yes, what we do is we work exclusively for communities. We will not work for the industry, therefore we have no conflict of interest of trying to represent the wireless industry and communities, as we work totally exclusive for the communities to look out for your interest in your behalf. And so essentially we work for approximately 1,000 different communities in about 38 different states, all the way across the United States. I generally am the consultant here for the Midwest. I did work with the League of Municipalities to assist them in battling LB 389 to help retain some control at the local level. And it's my understanding that that bill will not make it out of committee yet this year, and so I think we were successful in helping keep the control at the local level where you guys are most familiar with what's going on within your communities. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them as to what we do and how we may assist you.
Okay, thank you. Well, Bruce, you'll have a chance again after we're done with this discussion. Robert, appreciate that. Would it be fair to say that the systems you work on putting in place, regulations, if you will, help develop an orderly process that makes sure that the marketplace is open and accessible to telecom companies of all sizes? Right. For the most part, we want to make sure, in any ordinance, you need to make sure you treat everybody equally, but especially with the 1996 Telecommunications Act, that was one of the requirements, that you have to make sure you treat everybody uniformly. And so that's kind of the underlying principle of the ordinance that we create, is to make sure that from the beginning to the end of the process, everybody's being treated uniformly, and yet you guys get the information that you need to make an informed decision as to whether or not that facility at that location, at that height, is the right facility for all of the factors that come into play. And so yes, we design it so that hopefully it's a win-win scenario, because we want the technology, we just want to make sure that it's implemented in the right fashion. And you've done this work in other Nebraska communities? Yes. Recently, we've been added to Papillions. I've done it since 2007 in Nebraska communities. So I've been with CMS for about 10 years doing this. Previous to that, I had spent a number of years working for tower companies, designing towers, and so I've got a lot of knowledge on the industry, if you will. But we've worked for Papillion, La Vista, Sarpy, Saunders, Douglas County, quite a number of communities here within Nebraska. Okay.
So in your activities and that should you also then look at, you know, our current situation, what we have and the capabilities of that or not, or is that beyond the scope actually?
Well, generally, we're assisting the city for wireless applications and wireless providers when they want to upgrade and implement their systems. And so I can't force a Verizon or an AT&T to give you better service. That's their business decision on their own, as you're aware, and we really just have to respond to those business decisions. And so what's going to drive their business decisions is a climate that is a good climate for them to generate the revenue that they need to generate for these facilities. And obviously Norfolk is a large enough community where the base is there to drive the need for that service.
Any questions for Evan?
When you go ahead and set something up, how does that affect, like, if I have Wi-Fi at my house, and you set something up in that area, does that mess with each individual's Wi-Fi setup?
Well,
Is that working?
for the most part, what this is really targeting is your commercial and the applications that requires licensed wireless facilities. There are some exclusions that we'll go through, and we're going to work with the city to customize the ordinance to where it fits what you want within your community to give you the level of control and the preferences as to where you want facilities or don't want facilities. And so we customize ordinance to fit the city of Norfolk, if you will. And within there, you can decide different levels of, well, we want to really make sure that we don't just let this be the wild, wild west and let everybody build whatever they want, wherever they want, but yet give you the level of control that you're looking for.
So are you saying you're balancing aesthetics with
Aesthetics is certainly an element of the process and making sure that it blends in with the community. It's one of the things that as Shane had talked about, there's some communities that were really hit with. Mobility was a tower company that was trying to come in and plunk 80 and 100-foot poles. They wanted to do it between the back of the curb and the sidewalk in historical districts downtown in Papillion, as well as in residential districts, and just not an aesthetic fit, and they certainly didn't have the need for the facility that they were looking for. A lot of times what we get into is the need. Do you really need an 80-foot tower? Could you get by with a 50-foot tower, which reduces the aesthetics and the impacts dramatically when you got that extra height? And so part of what we do is we work with them to make sure that they can justify their proof of need, that they truly need what they're asking for. And then also we work into how can we physically and aesthetically blend this in. Sometimes it requires a stealth application, bell towers, flagpoles, whatever the case may be, to try and blend it in. And then some cases, if it's an industrial environment, just a standard monopole is totally fine. So, and again, that kind of depends on your direction. I really serve as an extension of your staff. And so I'm going to be working very closely with these guys as the applications come through to highlight and try and direct the applicants as to this is a location where we really want to improve the aesthetics, or maybe this one isn't such a concern. But all of that flexibility is built in with the ordinance as to give you guys the control and ability to create what you would like to create for your community.
but the underlying thing here is to provide the best possible service available at the same time?
Yeah, that's where the proof of need is, and obviously if we don't want them to build a facility that doesn't satisfy the need.
Right, okay.
Because we want the technology.
Thank you.
But it's a balancing act, making sure that it's, in some cases, they'll want to build something taller than what they actually need, because a lot of times the wireless industry may want to build a tall tower, then sell the tower to somebody else, and now that they got this extra tall tower, they can get future lease revenue from it, but it really wasn't needed for the wireless services. And so we focus on what does the wireless services need to provide good coverage.
When you're working on that proof of need, are you establishing the need of today or the need of tomorrow when you're working on the height of those towers?
Well, each application and each antenna, and as we go from 3G to 4G, the technology is such that it changes need with each different facility. And obviously what the small cell's talking about is hundreds of facilities within your community, typically on like street light poles or things to that respect, where they're closer together, lower elevation, which brings up different factors that need to be considered. And so as the technology changes, the need at some of these facilities change as well. Small cell, typically what they're doing is they're doing what they call a DAS type system, distributed antenna system. And so they're doing a backhaul where they still need the tall facilities because they're kind of a network from that tall wireless facility. So they still need that hub, but these 5G small cell sites are gonna be smaller in height, smaller in footprint. They're still gonna have some accessory equipment that they wanna put on the ground and things to that respect. And so it depends on the type of facility that we're talking about evaluating at the time. Sometimes it might be a macro facility, it might also be just a small cell or even a micro site.
So you kind of respond as, on an as-needed basis from the, like, if the city calls and says, hey, we have
When an application,
applicant, and then
Right.
otherwise if, say we run 6 months and we don't have anything.
then I won't be seeing you guys for 6 months.
See you then, okay.
Yep. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Adam.
This discussion has brought up my concerns now, because I want to have a discussion about how good the government is at deciding what we need. See, I believe the consumer should be the one to decide what we need, but I am against using eminent domain to put these towers in places of public property. I don't think that'll happen, though. I don't think that'll happen if the citizens are paying any attention at all. What I do think will happen is this ordinance will end up restricting businesses behind licenses. It'll attack their private property rights for a business to be able to put up its own network, to communicate with maybe East Norfolk communicating with West Norfolk, having all their accounting done somewhere else entirely. I think it'll interfere with that sort of thing. And I want to look out for my best interests. I want competition. I want to be able to set up my own ISP that uses wireless networks. And I did look at some of Lincoln's Law. I haven't read through all of it, but I don't believe there's very many private wireless networks that are owned by like small businesses and run by people to compete. And why is that? It's because the regulations are written so that no one else can do it but the corporations. When you allow someone to come in and give you advice and sort of run this sort of thing, the corporations have incentive to buy up control over that. And if you write this into ordinance, the corporations have incentive to get you all to vote in their favor. And this is a good way to restrict competition. How many internet service providers are there in Norfolk? I mean, there's, let's see, we've got Cable One, and what was the other one? It's like Quest or something like that. There's like 2. You have 2 choices. The internet's everywhere. There should be so many choices. There should be individuals running this. It shouldn't all be these giant corporations. And I think there's the opportunity, a good opportunity for people to gain control over the internet again and run their own networks if the regulation is only placed on the government and on corporations and to stop them from taking control over it. You had a vote on VoIP recently, and it really showcased how the city council doesn't really understand how the internet works. There's so many games that are paid subscription. There's so many programs and software and streaming that's VoIP. How is that going to be taxed? Like, none of that was brought up in the discussion. Nobody really understands that. But there's people like me, computer programmers and stuff, who really want to provide like as cheap as internet as possible to as many people as possible, setting up private networks in people's own homes that distribute through wirelessly, through the wireless technology that's completely outside of the government's control. If these regulations restrict that, it's incredibly crippling. It just slams the door shut and puts like 50 locks on it for people if they have to get this license for this. So I can't possibly support this. It's ridiculous.
Okay. Thank you, Bruce.
Lincoln's Law is not the law I want to see here in Norfolk, Nebraska. Lincoln is the worst example of city law. It's even worse than Omaha in a lot of ways. Do not copy Lincoln's Law.
Okay. Questions or comments? Any further discussion on this before we act on the motion? Seeing none further, I'd ask for your vote on approval of the agreement.
All council members present voting in the affirmative, motion carries.
Moving to item number 23, for a motion to consider resolution number 2017-24, authorizing the institution of a 3-month interim application process for the issuance of permits by the city on applications for the construction of wireless telecommunications towers, facilities, and related facilities, and authorizing the development of an ordinance regulating the siting of wireless telecommunications facilities.
You know, I'd move resolution 2017-24. Second.
Okay. Clint, can you kick this off?
Certainly, thank you, Mayor. Resolution 2017-24 basically is the first step of what the Center for Municipal Solutions and Mr. Newman bring to the city as we seek to access his expertise in dealing with the with applications related to tower and sightings for this technology to serve the community. So what this does is basically, and Mr. Newman has already provided to us, I don't know, what is it, 20, 25 pages? The model ordinance that they utilize, and we've started the process of reviewing that in hopes that we would be moving ahead with that. What this resolution does is it just kind of explains that what's going to happen is with this is that we're going to have an interim application process if this passes, and within the next 3 months we'll be back with an ordinance that would basically replace. I think we have 1 page in our city code that addresses the siting of these facilities, which is really oversimplifies all of those things that are there. And the key is to balance the needs of the community with the aesthetics and all of those kinds of things, so that the providers can be profitable. They can make those things available to us. And so what we've got here with item 22 on the agenda is a resolution that just kind of maps out the future in regard to this, and then that's complemented by number 24, which would come up next, which is actually a little bit of a temporary ordinance to talk about what happens if, while that ordinance is going together, there are applications that come before us, and how we'll access Mr. Newman's expertise and the Center for Municipal Solutions expertise in just the next few months. Happy to answer any questions or.
If you have anything to add to that, please do.
I'm sure I didn't get it right.
I think it was good.
If you want, I'd be happy to. But essentially, yes, it's a bridging process that eliminates moratoriums so that we don't slow down the development of wireless facilities within the city, and it still allows us to move forward with keeping the technology current while we're updating that ordinance and making it fit. Keep in mind that the government already has a number of regulations in place on what we can and cannot do for Wi-Fi and ham radio and that type of stuff, and none of that can be infringed upon, and so whatever regulation we come up still needs to comply with all the federal laws.
And maybe you can address the marketplace and size of companies. Certainly, large corporations have a great share of the market here, but there are smaller telecom companies that operate within the marketplace.
Mm-hmm.
Is that true? Yeah.
Yes, there are. And each provider some of them have bigger geographic areas than others, and so it is a little difficult to for them to be on the same plane because they don't have the resources that an AT&T or a Verizon might have, so.
And in fact, without an orderly process to maintain competition here, it seems to me it would be easier for the larger corporations to dominate the marketplace.
Absolutely, and like I said at the beginning, we have to make sure we treat everybody equally. And one of the things that I've found, a number of applicants come to me and say, it's so nice to know exactly what we need to provide, because many times we'll go in front of communities and then they'll say, well, what about and what if, and then the process gets delayed because they have to come back multiple times to present different what ifs and what abouts. And so by doing a process that's fully developed, and so that you have all of the information you need to make a fully informed decision at the first time, you can actually accelerate the process.
Thank you. All right.
Might be worth
Further.
noting is, as far as competition in town goes, for internet, there's 3 cable providers. There's 4 DSCs, there's 4 fiber companies, 2 fixed wireless companies, 2 mobile companies, and 2 satellite companies that all provide wireless service to the Norfolk community. There's a total of 17.
Very good. Any other questions or comments on this? Seeing no other discussion, please vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative, Resolution 2017-24 is adopted.
Okay, moving to item number 24, I'd look for a motion to consider ordinance number 5472, enacting Chapter 13, Article 13 of the City Code to provide for an interim application process for wireless telecommunications facilities.
I'll offer for consideration ordinance number 5472.
Second that, Your Honor.
Okay, I think Clint addressed this pretty well previously. Are there any questions on this and what this does in conjunction with what we just voted on? Clint, anything else to add on that?
No, I think the key to all of these things is that with what you've put in place here already with these first 2 items and what we anticipate happening with the ordinance when we come along, is rather than have somebody from the industry just come and tell us things, we'll have the ability with Mr. Newman's help to speak their language and to ascertain whether we're really getting the best deal for the community, and then that information can be provided to the council and you can make your decisions about these various things as they come forward. So I think it's an exciting time.
Yeah, and I think given the timing and necessary investment in terms of the process. Any other questions, comments, discussion? Okay, if not, short title, please, Beth.
An ordinance of the City of Norfolk, Nebraska to enact Chapter 13, Article 13 of the Official City Code to provide for an interim application process for wireless telecommunications facilities and to provide for the publication of this ordinance in pamphlet form.
Okay, please vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative, ordinance 5472 carries on first reading.
Your Honor, I would move that we suspend the rules and pass ordinance 5472 on second.
Second.
Okay. Any discussion on that? If not, please vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative, ordinance 5472 carries on second and third.
Okay, moving to item number 25, look for a motion to consider ordinance number 5473, amending section 24-150 to allow the parking of a speed monitoring trailer in areas designated as no parking.
I'll make the motion, Your Honor.
Second.
Okay, and Chief?
Your Honor, members of the council, this ordinance is designed to allow for the parking of the Police Division speed monitoring trailer at various locations where parking would normally not be allowed. We have a small trailer, you maybe have seen it out on various locations. It'll show what the speed limit is for that street, and then as a vehicle approaches it, radar will pick up that speed and will begin to identify, give visual feedback to the approaching driver how fast the vehicle is going. If it's flashing, that means you're going too fast and you probably need to slow down a little bit. If it's solid, then you're at or below the speed limit. We've had occasions where we've had citizen complaints about speed in various locations, but there wasn't any real good place to put that trailer except in a spot where parking is normally not allowed. The trailer has to be in close proximity to the street in order to be able to actually get a good reading of the traffic coming towards it. So any place that we might put this where parking is not allowed, we will review it for safety first, and if it can be safely parked there, that's when we would use it. If it would be a safety issue, then we wouldn't park it there. Be glad to answer any questions that you might have.
Chief, for what period of time would you normally have that parked there?
It will depend on the amount of traffic and the seriousness of the violations maybe that we're seeing there. It may be there for a week, and if it's needed in other locations, that may kind of speed up the process. It may be there 2 or 3 weeks. It's been up in my neighborhood now for, I believe, going on 3 weeks now, and I'm not sure what message is being sent, but I am certainly trying to make that thing not flash when I go driving.
I would assume you would do that.
How many areas around town, Chief, do you think this would apply to in terms of the
On any
parking
given,
restriction?
on any given day, just about anywhere in the city, there will be neighbors or citizens who will feel that the traffic is going too fast. One of the issues we have in our society is that everybody seems to be in a hurry, and they want to get someplace as quickly as they can, and everyone thinks that they're a really good driver, so they're not being unsafe when they're driving fast. Other people are being unsafe when they get in their way, and that's part of our education process. We also will give tickets as well to try to educate them, but if we can have this out there and they can get a visual feedback that you're going too fast, hopefully that would be enough to get them to slow down without having to actually issue them a citation, cost them some money and some points off their driver's license. But on any given day, there's probably vehicles speeding anywhere in the community.
Good questions for Chief on this? Okay, no, thank you.
Like he says, a lot of vehicles speed around town, but there aren't that many accidents from these speedings. I worry that the signs flashing and other presentation to people might lead to accidents being caused just solely from the sign itself. I wouldn't want the city to be liable to that and have to pay any fines that come from that. So I think it should only be placed in places where there are parking. I don't think any special exemption needs to be made. Thanks.
Thanks, Bruce. Further discussion, comments, questions on the council? If not, short title, please, Beth.
An ordinance of the City of Norfolk, Nebraska to amend Section 24-150 of the official city code to allow placement of a speed trailer in areas where prohibited by restrictions in the code, to provide when this ordinance shall be in full force and effect, and to provide for publication of this ordinance in pamphlet form.
Okay, please vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative, ordinance 5473 carries on first reading.
Your Honor, I'd move that we suspend the rules and pass ordinance 5473 on second and third reading so that we'd be able to institute moving this thing around more often.
A motion and a second. Any discussion on that? If not, please vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative, ordinance 5473 carries on second and third.
Okay. Lastly, item number 26, for a motion to consider ordinance number 5474, creating section 14-74 of the city code to make it an offense to enter a motor vehicle belonging to another without permission. Do we have a motion? Do we have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Second.
Okay. And Chief, can you tell us about this, please?
Thank you, Your Honor. This is an ordinance that we have found that we believe is necessary for use in our community. Over the past, we have had encounters with individuals who have gotten into vehicles that belong to somebody else. They might be rummaging through the vehicles. They might be looking for something to take. We will have caught them there, but since there was nothing actually taken or damaged, there was nothing that we could do about that particular violation or them actually entering the vehicle. Just recently, at one of our local parking lots, we had a vehicle that was gone through. It had obviously been rummaged and things moved around inside, but nothing appeared to have been taken. We went back through, we found some security video in the area. We were able to identify who the individual was that was going through the vehicle, but yet there really was no violation because, again, nothing was damaged and nothing was taken. We've also encountered situations where we have people who are looking for some place to sleep, and they will check along some vehicles, find a vehicle that's unlocked, and they'll just get inside the vehicle, and that's where they'll spend the night. The owner will come out in the morning and find somebody sleeping in their vehicle. It's a little disconcerting, to say the least, for those people, and they will call us in order to deal with that. This is an ordinance that Lincoln has that they utilize in these types of situations. It has been copied verbatim from what Lincoln has. And we would like to be able to have this ordinance for us to be able to take an enforcement action if we encounter situations like this. And while we were discussing this during our city staff meeting, one of the questions that came up by one of the city staff was, well, what if you have a situation where it's really cold out or the element's really bad and they just need someplace for shelter? Otherwise, it could be dangerous to them to continue to be out in the elements. My response was, it'll be pretty much like anything else that we have. When you have a situation, an officer encounters that situation, he or she has to use their discretion in applying the law that may be appropriate. If there are extenuating circumstances, we certainly, just because it's a technical violation, that doesn't necessarily mean that we actually have to make an arrest, we have to pursue charges. As a fail-safe, our citations or any citations issued under this ordinance, they go through the city attorney's office, and the city attorney reviews all of these cases, and if he has a question about it or he is a little concerned about whether it was actually applied properly, he certainly will come down and talk to the operations captain, or he'll come down and talk to me and say, now, are we sure we really want to do this? So our intent is not just to issue tickets. Our intent is to try to deal with the problem that our officers encounter, that they really have no other option other than to just tell the person to move on. Glad to answer any questions.
So, Chief, another example of that officer discretion could apply to an instance with a small child or an animal inside of a car on a hot day. Someone assessing the situation, helping out there, would be a pretty clear example where officer discretion would be used.
Yes.
Any other questions, comments on
So the
that?
current trespassing laws don't apply to this situation?
Not the vehicle. The current trespassing laws actually apply to real estate, homes, businesses, that type of thing.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
I wanted to ask you the question. What alternatives to this law have you considered as to amending harassment, trespassing, or deprivation of rights to privacy laws? Why is putting the ordinance into miscellaneous the best course of action? Because when reading the Lincoln laws, I had concerns about this, the particular place it was placed. I feel that it would fit better in maybe somewhere else, or just considering that, what have you considered as far as those?
Are you talking about the miscellaneous section of the city code? For us, that's really designed for people to either be able to find or for officers to find. It doesn't really affect the ordinance itself or the way that it would actually be used. So it's just placed in that section because it seems to be a section that's kind of a catch-all section, and that's where they end up. But it has no real effect on the way that it will be applied or the penalties or anything like that.
All right. The other concern I had is the penalty is a fine, right? Under trespassing, they also do fines, but I was concerned that this overly penalizes the poor because they have less money. So if they were charged with this, they might not be able to pay, whereas someone who's wealthy can go rummage through several cars and not have a problem. With trespassing, the law increases the more times they repeat it, right? So I would consider maybe placing it into trespassing rather than having it be the city ordinance, this individual thing. I don't think it belongs in miscellaneous. What do you have to say to that?
I guess I would have to respectfully disagree. I believe that it is designed for a specific purpose, which is individuals entering vehicles without permission that don't belong to them. And it is a specific tool for a narrow scope of instances that it would happen. Again, the officers are going to use discretion. The prosecutor has discretion. And if there are extenuating circumstances for an individual, say they absolutely have no money, there's no place to go, and as a last resort, they got into this vehicle, that's something that can be taken into consideration. The fine is there's a great distance in city ordinance fines from 0 on up. And again, that can be applied by the judge when they are looking at the totality of the information involved in that particular case. So just because the individual enters a vehicle doesn't mean that they would get a maximum penalty. It could be a very small fine. It could be used as an educational thing, but again, it's got to have some repercussion for that individual, because we encounter people time and again, the same individuals that we have to ask to get out of the vehicle, move along, that's not your car. And so for some people, one time would be enough and they'll never do it again. For other people, unless there is some penalty, they'll continue to do it because they really don't feel that there's any skin off their nose if they continue to do it.
Right, which is the concern I have with the homeless and poor people perhaps being overly penalized and wealthy people not having to serve time in jail or such, which they might have to otherwise, which would prevent wealthy people from doing the crime when they know they can just pay the fee. If, for instance, searching through someone's car, they were able to get information or something, but you weren't able to prove that, this law doesn't properly address that concern of mine, which is why I think you should consider some alternative to it, at least for the time being. What judges have you talked to about this current
Bruce,
law?
I think on that last train of thought, it was addressed that officer discretion would have a pretty wide breadth on this, which I think addresses some of your concerns. We're not inventing this out of thin air, and there is a vacuum here where there's a challenge on assigning some kind of penalty for criminal intent in a situation like this. And so really, I think what we're doing is allowing for some kind of mechanism for us to fill that vacuum.
Of course, there's a hole here that needs to be patched, but you're patching it with the wrong kind of tape. You're not putting caulk in the hole, you're putting duct tape over it, and the water is just gonna flow through. Again, I'm looking out for the little guy here. He's gonna be penalized worse. And then there's not really a penalty there for wealthy people. This kind of law doesn't work this way.
Well, intent in both cases would be judged, would be part of the discussion and sentencing
Which
as
is why I asked him which
far as
judges he's consulted about it. And I really, have you talked to any particular judges?
I have not. I have not talked to any judges. We have talked to our city attorney. Generally, when we want to recommend some type of a change in ordinance or a new ordinance or that, we will go ahead and discuss it with our city attorney, and we will view the pros and cons and what we want to achieve by this. And then if we're all in the same accord, then we go ahead and present it to the elected officials. They'll go ahead and pass it. If we end up making an arrest or issuing a citation, at that point, if a person wants to utilize the system and plead not guilty and appear in court, then a judge would have an opportunity to review whether or not they believe that is a fair and equitable ordinance.
So this is an arrestable offense?
Now, this would be something that generally,
Yeah.
we would probably issue a citation to
Yeah,
them.
citation, okay.
And
I
then
was
if they
just making
refuse
sure.
to comply, then it may go on into some other things, and then they could end up being arrested for that. But this would be generally something that you would ask them to get out of the vehicle, find out what you can about them, and then if there's nothing else going on,
Sure.
go ahead and issue them the citation and tell them, please, don't be doing this.
I really believe the police officers will have really good judgment involved with this. I'm concerned about the judges and how they will feel this law is intended to be used. Those are my concerns, and it really is a matter of private property. You don't want someone on your private property in your car, which should be private property. And that's why I feel it should fit under deprivation of rights or trespassing instead. But thank you.
All right. Good discussion. All right, thank you. Anything else? Comments, questions, council? If not, short title, please, Beth.
An ordinance of the City of Norfolk, Nebraska to create Section 14-74 of the official city code to make it an offense to enter a motor vehicle belonging to another without permission, to provide when this ordinance shall be in full force and effect, and to provide for publication of this ordinance in pamphlet form.
Okay, I'd ask for you to vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative, ordinance 5474 carries on first reading.
Your Honor, I move we suspend the rules and pass ordinance 5474 on second and third. Second.
Okay, any discussion on that? I would note, we just looked it up, section 14-74 is under the trespass code, city code. So, no further discussion, please vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative, ordinance 5474 carries on second and third.
All right, that's the last item on the agenda. I do see a new face out in the crowd, new addition to city staff. As most of you know, Diane Becker, our former communications director, took a job with the League of Nebraska Municipalities, and Liz Wallace is joining us as our new full-time communications director. I don't know if everyone on the council had a chance to meet her and wanted to take the time to do that and make introduction to the broader public as well. So Liz, yeah, if you want to come say hi, please do.
Hello, everybody. It's nice to meet you, and it's great to be a part of the City of Norfolk and working with you all.
Great. Thank you very much. Great to have you on board. Look forward to working with you. All right, with that, we are concluded. Oh.
Before you conclude, I wanted to comment on the consent agenda thing real quick. There was.
We got a couple minutes,
just
Bruce.
real quick.
Technically, we're supposed to be done,
Real-
but
There's Surface tablet computers for over $25,000 that were part of the consent agenda. Who will receive these?
we'll allow that. Can we talk about the Surface? Lyle, you want to address that?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name's Lyle, Mr. Finley. The Surface computers you see would be ones like these, like this. They're on a rotation basis, I think about every 3 years or so, 4-year rotation, where they get cycled out and replaced. You also see one for desktops that are mostly for administrative staff that don't need the mobility issues.
I see. So they're just in rotation here amongst the people employed in the city council?
No, city staff, so that.
Just all the staff will
Right.
be able to
Well, the
use
council has them too. but
Yes,
most of the
okay,
staff,
okay.
yeah.
So it will be the staff and the city council. Are these really required? Do we need to spend $25,000 on new computers for everybody in the city council? I was talking to my grandmother not too long ago, and she was talking about how the city council did a great job back before they had computers. So I'm concerned that this would be a superfluous expense as well.
Well, sure, do we need to have computers to live? Probably not. But in an effort to save time, money, and expenses, the ability to take these computers home with the staff members, with the council members, as opposed to sending them a letter in the mail, lets all of these entities that were here tonight move at 100 times more speed. So no, we don't necessarily need them, but to keep up with community expectations, the history that the city has, is very vital.
I see it as an
Bruce, I think,
no, this is really important.
yeah, no, it's just, I want to say to that, it does allow for an increase in responsiveness that you wouldn't see without the technology. So I think we are utilizing technologies to better serve constituents.
You already have computers, though, that can do this task. I don't see how the new computers are going to do a $25,000 better job of the tasks that you're doing currently. And I can't see why the city would need these.
I can address that.
It's just like
It's a
any
piece
other
of
piece of
machinery.
capital that we have.
Yeah, that's
Sorry,
exactly
Lyle.
what I was gonna say.
Yeah.
It's a piece of machinery that has a normal life expectancy, and when time comes, just like do you have the first cell phone that you use?
Actually, I do. It still works.
Congratulations. Many people don't. The life expectancy on those, once that is reached, it begins to depreciate. The decay of performance goes down significantly, the reliability. So when the life is up on them, to maintain, we need to replace them.
How many are broken currently of the ones that you had prior to these?
None, because that gentleman right there watches it like a hawk. And he rotates them out at the end of their life, and everybody is running on 100% capacity.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, everyone.